Okay, welcome to our Admin Public Works Committee meeting for Tuesday, May 3rd. We'll start with the first item on the agenda, which is the roll call.
Good evening. Council Member Joe Garatano,
Here.
CM Dave Bertolino,
Here.
CM Rob Jaxie,
Here.
Council Member Nathan Hopper,
Here.
Council Member Teresa Clark, Council Member Lauren Eden here, and Council Member Tracy Nehan here, Council Member Farmer
Here.
All right, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the election of the committee chair. So at this time, we'll entertain any nominations for committee chair. Councilmember Farmer.
I'll nominate you.
Okay. Motion made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Nyan. All right, with that nomination on the floor, do we have to do it by name or just yay or nay? You can do it voice vote. Okay.
You have to close the nominations first.
Yeah, any other nominations at this time? All right, seeing none, then we only have one nomination on the floor, and all those in favor of the nomination made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Nyan, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes, and thank you for that opportunity. I'll try to do my best to serve our committee. All right, third item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the April 12th meeting. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes? Made by Councilmember Bertolino, seconded by, is there a second? Councilmember Edens. Any questions on the minutes? Any edits? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Any opposed or abstain? We have one abstention, two abstentions, one from Councilmember Jaxie and Councilmember Farmer. All right. Fourth item on the agenda is public participation. Do we have any speaker cards? Mr. Newberry.
Mayor Boland has submitted a speaker card.
All right, Mayor Boland, please feel free to come up, state your name and your ward.
I'm sorry.
We get to do this to you now.
That's right. Get the watch started. So first of all, so Jim Boland, Ward 6. And I want to first of all thank you for being here this evening and to take just a few minutes to talk to you about something that is, I think, very important for the city. And it has been one of the hallmarks of things that I've been looking for since and pushing for since I became mayor. This concerns item 7B1, which is now titled Native Grasses. And I want to talk about that in a moment on your agenda. This is actually the first time, I believe, since 2016, since I've been in this position, that I have attended an admin public works meeting to make an ask. And that's what I'm going to do, is make an ask. So the ask relates to beautifying our city. And you may have seen the plantings that we have east of Highway 100 in the median between 109 and West Glen Farms Drive. And I think we would all admit that they're very nice. They look great. And in about 30 days, they're really going to pop and they'll look even better. This isn't much different than spending a little bit of money to spiff up your house when you're getting ready to sell it. The only difference is we're doing it for the entire city. And I believe that this is one of those things that gets the most bang for the buck. The hundreds of thousands of people that see this on a daily basis could be potential buyers, potential businesses, existing residents. It certainly has there's no denying that the only thing these beautification patches can do is to make our residents and future residents and businesses feel better about our city. And again, the price tag for this compared to everything we have in our budget and other things that we do on a daily basis, I would argue is very small for the effect that we get out of it. specifically relative to the second phase of this. So that was the first phase, east of Highway 100, second phase, west of Highway 100. As some of you know, from time to time, there are people on both sides of that divide who wish that the city was more of a oneness. I remember when I was sitting in the chair over here as a representative of Ward 6, one of the questions or statements actually that I got from people to me from Ward 6 as a council member was, well, why do we pay for all the stuff in town center? And, we don't walk on the bridge. We don't do this, that, or the other. And so one of the things that I've strived to do during my time as mayor is to bridge any of those divides and to make us one city, both in actuality, which we are, and in feel, because it's important, I believe, that our residents actually feel that. So that is in part why I recommended that we go to phase 2 with beautification west of Highway 109. Now, the question becomes, so we have two questions here for this committee. The first question is, should we do it? And I hope I've made a case that we should. Then the second question is, how do we do it? Well, so this can get a little subjective, and I want to emphasize at this point that I greatly appreciate the effort of all of you and the thoughts relative to native grasses. I am not necessarily opposed to a small part of these plantings, including some native grasses. But with all due respect, I'm going to say two things about it. Number one, wards 1 and 6 have plenty of grass. We have a lot of grass. We need some flowers. We need some shrubs, much like what we have east of Highway 109 in the medians of Highway 100. Number two, if the premise for this or the purpose for this is to make certain that as best we can, our residents that live west of 109 feel the same way about Wildwood that those who live east of 109, I would argue that changing it up and making that section of the city different with the plantings is not the way to go. I would respectfully suggest that we essentially mimic, with maybe some slight modification with a native grass or two here or there, west of Highway 109, just like pretty much what we have east of 109, so that our residents recognize this city as one Wildwood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. All right, do we have any other public comment? Okay, and I believe Councilmember Rambo joined related to one of the agenda items. So Dr. Rambo, if you wish to raise your hand to speak now, you can do that, or if not, we will come to you when that agenda item comes up. All right. Well, then in that case there, we'll get into we have an item here on the agenda. We'll close out public participation, just committee overview. And for those of you that are familiar with the committee, you already have awareness of how we typically run our meetings. But for our new council members new to the committee here, I added this just as a quick recap of what we do. So typically we will cover our administration and public works items, and we have it broken out for information and for action. But the key thing that I want to draw your attention to is in the agenda, we do have a section that says topics for inclusion on future agendas. And the committee recently reviewed the items that we had and started to put projected dates of when we'd like to see those items come up on the agenda. So if you have any items that the committee should review, that's where we try to get them scheduled in, unless it's an item that is of urgency. So that is it. All right, well then we'll get into administration. We have several for information items. And the first item is the update on the Deer Management Subcommittee. And Dr. Rambo and several other members that had formed the subcommittee had left off that Dr. Rambo was putting together a report. So Dr. Rambo, if you wish to comment on that now for the committee here, you can do so.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just a bit of a recap. The Bureau of Public Safety took this up in 2018, and it in July of 2021, the Deer Management Subcommittee that the Board of Public Safety developed produced a report. There was a whole lot of good work that went into it, but there seemed to be some imbalances in the analysis, and it was a little short on data. And so we discussed the report and took it into a new committee a new subcommittee of this committee about 8 months ago. And the data collection and references and such pursuant to my objections were mostly done by the end of last summer. But the verification resources, the people from Conservation Department, the people from private entities that provide deer management services, et cetera, went into their busy season. It was tricky to do, and life got in the way. So I want to apologize for the delay, but I don't feel too bad because it's only been a few months, and the process is a multi-year process. So Brad Wendling retired, Sergeant Wendling. That has added a bit of difficulty, and so I haven't been able to close the loop with Captain Mundell, about getting in touch with the person who handles deer programs at the county police headquarters. He asked for questions, but this topic is too tricky and cumbersome to just send a list of questions and get the maximum out of that. So I'm trying to get a conversation with that person. I have several calls into Missouri Conservation Commission, but it's mostly honestly for verification of stuff that I already know to be the case based on their web resources and so forth. So this is it's an extremely complex topic, and the challenge is to meet the goal of comprehensive analysis. Well, even though I need to distill it down to a manageable and accessible size for the committee's review. And so I've been filling with the appendices, footnotes, embedded references, and other means of condensation, I think at a manageable size. And so I don't know how much info you want, but the report has an introduction, history, the various impacts of deer and those sorts of things, definition of deer management programs, but then it goes into an analysis of every identified management method possible, and then some recommendations and conclusions, including that next step in the process. The bottom line on the report is there may be some efficacy in a few non-lethal methods like fencing and a no-feed ordinance and so forth, but they're exclusion methods. They're not intended to achieve anything in terms of population management. So there's quite a lot of data on deer population dynamics that's separated into an appended spreadsheet, because herd population dynamics and distribution patterns, both of humans and the deer in Wildwood, complicate any actions. And so the summary is that the report looked at and rejected all non-lethal methods such as relocation and sterilization, which are either ineffective or illegal, and focuses on lethal methods. There's they are effective but costly, and so they kind of split into two camps: the expanded recreational hunting and then the professional programs that employ euthanasia in various guises. And there's a comprehensive write-up on each of those, but I tried to put most of the data in appendices so that the text would read well and be more manageable. And so my intent, bottom line on this spiel, is I intend to get the body of the report to Dave and Larry, my counterparts, for review this week. And I expect to submit the report for review at next month's meeting. So do you have any specific questions I can answer, or is that a sufficient update?
Looking here, it does not appear that there are any questions. So thank you, Council Member Dr. Rambo. And we'll look for that, for you to send it, as you mentioned, to the members of the subcommittee, and then afterwards, the rest of the committee will see it. So
Great, thanks
appreciate
very
the
much.
update.
Thank you, and congratulations on your chairpersonship, hood, whatever you call that.
Thank you. Okay, next on the list is update on Old State Road issues. City Administrator, is there any new information on this, or is this something that we should revisit, whether we take it off or not?
Mr. Chair, no, there really isn't anything new. There is one final item that Mr. Brown and I are going to do and that is to circle back with the trustees of Fairhaven Estates and just finalize whether they do or do not want to have an island there on Lakeshore Meadows Drive. So Mr. Brown is setting up that meeting. That'll occur either this week or next week. Once we put that to bed, that's pretty much it. The St. Louis County Department of Transportation has indicated there's nothing further that they can do. They're happy to put that island in, but there's nothing further that they would do in terms of signage, lighting up the signage or anything. So there's nothing further for the city to do other than we are doing a speed survey further south on Old State Road. We were collecting vehicle counts and speed near that crosswalk that we lit up recently. And then we moved that device further south. So we are capturing data there. There have been some claims that there's speeding and so forth there. Empirically, the data is that there's not a large amount of speeding that is going on, but we're going to collect that data. And I am also in the process of summarizing data that was I asked the Wildwood Precinct to gather. You may recall that there was a resident. Well, no, let me back up. A person came to the council who was not a resident of Wildwood, is a resident of Chesterfield, in fact, and presented data about the number of accidents over a period of time on Old State Road. So I asked the captain to verify that data. And I will be putting out a memo to the council as well as others, in particular the individual who presented that information to the council to provide the facts in terms of what's going on Old State Road. But other than that, and I sent to the council this morning a link to the interview that the mayor did last evening with Fox 2 News regarding the crosswalk and explaining, that the city is proactive in terms of lighting up crosswalks where it's needed, where it's necessary, and the cooperation that was between the city of Wildwood and St. Louis County to get something done in what Councilman Mark Carter would say light speed in terms of what we were able to accomplish as a result of information that was brought to us about an accident that occurred on Old State Road. But Mr. Chair, that's really all that's going on with Old State Road.
Any questions from anyone about that item? Okay, so for now, we'll take that off, and I believe we'll get more updates in the future as we learn more. All right, third item on the list, is there any update on the electrical vehicle charging station?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we've been approached by yet another vendor, and Mr. Brown and I will take all of those meetings because we discussed at the last committee meeting that we don't want to lock in on any one particular vendor or type of charging station, given the fact that there may be a nationwide standardization. So that meeting is to take place on Thursday morning. We have not heard back, to my knowledge, from Ameren yet in terms of their information that we're looking for from them. So we continue to keep moving down the road and gathering information, and then we'll summarize it and bring it back to the committee. Probably at the July meeting, I'm thinking.
Anyone have anything related to that item? All right, moving on. Update on accessibility issues. I think at this point, unless you have something, City Administrator, that was an item that Councilmember Clark is working on. So she's not here tonight. So I think we'll come back to that.
Mhm.
All right, and then the fifth item, any update on the review of IT systems regarding ransomware and other threats?
Just two quick statements. Number one, I am working with another vendor in terms of getting some data that will either support what we are doing or provide some additional information that we may want to utilize. And I'm going to try this week or next week at the latest to have a conversation with Mr. Hopper. And I've been remiss in reaching out to Mr. Hopper, but I'm going to try to do that. It'll probably be likely next week, given if his schedule will allow a conversation with me about that, Mr. Hopper.
That should work for me. Be happy to help when I can.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, that covers all the administration items. We'll go to Public Works. So none for information. First for action item is the review of potential native prairie grass planting areas. And obviously we heard comment tonight from the mayor about that. So is that Rick?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. Many members, I think we do have a couple new folks on the committee now. This topic, as Mayor Boland referenced, was presented to you last fall originally. At that time, we presented some landscaping plans that were prepared by Ken Keitel with Terra Spec that would install landscape plantings at Route 100 and Mueller Road and Route 100 and Wild Horse Creek Road. Those are two crossovers on Route 100 west of Pond Road. Again, I think as Mayor Boland had referenced, the idea was to extend some of the landscaping along Route 100 further to the west. So Ken Keitel has been our landscape architect that's worked with us developing pretty much all the landscaping that's been implemented on 109 and Route 100. So the thought was to implement those plans that would be consistent with the work that had been done previously on both 109 and Route 100. So that was kind of the school of thought, was to proceed forward with a consistent pattern of landscaping that would be recognizable and consistent with what was done previously. So the information that was provided to you, I was a little late getting it posted, the memo today. So Michelle was kind enough to print it out. So you should have a hard copy in front of you of those drawings. And just to refresh your memory, the original landscaping plans that were created last fall for the more formal landscaping, there were two versions that were presented. One was a full-scale version that was about $102,000. And then we looked at it and tried to cut it back a bit to make it a little more cost-effective. So Ken had also prepared a scaled-back version that we're estimating to cost about $73,000. So at that time, the discussion shifted towards the possibility of implementing native prairie grass plantings as well. So I did have Ken look into that with his firm. He contacted DJM Ecoscapes, a firm that's well known in the area for native prairie grass plantings in the city. We've worked with those folks previously on other projects. So we also provided that information to you in the memorandum. I believe Michelle printed out, there was like 6 areas or 7 areas that we identified as potential areas for native prairie grass plantings. And again, this is not really apples to apples. It's kind of apples and oranges in that these areas are not the same locations. They're different locations that we thought made more sense. So we weren't trying to replace the more formal landscaping, but we were trying to recommend other areas that could be implemented in the future for native prairie grasses. So the areas that Ken identified again in those drawings were areas A through G. They were all on Route 100, but they were basically between, I guess, St. Albans Road eastwardly all the way through to the original pedestrian bridge close to West Glen Farms, and then one area on Strecker near Orville Road, which I think Councilmember Edenson suggested we look at. So a lot wider range of areas potentially for native prairie grasses. The prices that I included with the memo for the native prairie grasses ranged from, depends on how we were to do it. and how you essentially seed or install the seeds for the prairie grasses. But the cost range from just under 13 grand to almost 100 grand for those areas A through area G that Ken had recommended for consideration. He also got some costs for maintenance. Not to say that there isn't maintenance involved with the more formal landscaping, there certainly is, but it's even more critical when you do the native prairie grasses. For the first 5 years, you really need to keep an eye on them and maintain them to get them established. So Ken provided some costs from DJM Ecoscapes for the maintenance the first 5-year period, which I believe averaged about $14,000 a year. So those are the two areas for consideration tonight. Again, we were bringing this back to you and really need some direction with regard to which direction or you'd like to proceed. We've pretty much missed the possibility of doing something this spring, but we are in prime position to implement a project this fall, get the plans ready for bids in the summertime so that we could come out of summer and do some planting. So with that, I'll turn it over for any comments or questions. And again, we'd like to get some direction relative to what to proceed with. I didn't mention we do have $100,000 in the budget for beautification for 2022. Thank you.
All right, City Administrator, you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those members that are new to the committee, I just want to reiterate something that Mr. Brown pointed out, because we are comparing apples to oranges. And so I want to make sure that we stay on track to what the initial focus was, which as the mayor spoke earlier, it was to look at plantings, the two crossovers that Mr. Brown referenced on Route 100 at those two crossovers. And that's part of his beautification plan. And that's where that was the initial proposal that we brought to the committee back in the fall. So I just want to make sure that the new committee members, it doesn't get commingled here. We're really talking two separate things. We're talking about the plantings west of 100 that the mayor was talking about. So, I mean, that's a discussion in and of itself in terms of what types of plantings, either these or something else. And then other plantings throughout the city that we might want to look at. But if they get commingled, I think we will lose focus on what it is that we initially were trying to bring to the committee.
So maybe to help simplify it, what would be your recommendation for the committee to consider for us to move forward, and then we can discuss?
I think for this evening, it'd be my recommendation. If Mr. Brown feels differently, please let me know. But that we would focus on the two crossovers that Mr. Brown referenced in terms of what we want to do with regards to plantings at those two areas. If we want to go with either option one or option two that Ken Keitel provided, or if we want to do something different. And that's not this document here. This is prairie grasses. I'm talking what I'm talking about is we brought with bushes and flowers and things like that. That was the $102,000 one or the $72,000 proposal. But then at that time, I think we got off on talking about prairie grasses either there, but then it got expanded to other areas. So I think it would be my recommendation if we could just focus it for now anyway on those two areas that the mayor. It's really part of his beautification plan that he has announced to the residents that we're trying to do west of 109. So I'd like to see if we could focus on the types of plantings that we would like to see in those two areas. And then once we make that decision, then if the committee wants to look at other areas, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, and just so that maybe we don't get too buried into the details, when you say focus on the plantings, are you saying refer to what you presented previously, or are you looking for the committee then to get into that?
Well, Mr. Brown can speak up, but I guess from my perspective, two proposals were presented at two different price points. Because initially the conversation was at one, it was slightly over what is budgeted in its entirety for plantings. Then we went back and had Ken Keitel scale it back down to the $72,000. And you have drawings here of the type of thing. And I don't know if that's, if that's appropriate for the community to get into the types of plantings as opposed to more, just generally speaking, is that the kind of what we do? But that's where the conversation then kind of went off in terms of, well, if we don't do that, maybe we do prairie grasses and so forth. And that's where Mr. Brown was asked to go back and look at that as well as some other things. So my recommendation is to look at those two proposals in terms of these types of plantings. If that, so the committee can decide on one or either of those two, or look at prairie grasses in lieu of these types of normal type bushes that would be along the median. Or if the committee decides they want to do something different.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear, especially for folks that are joining the conversation.
If with the chair's permission, I'd like to make sure that Mr. Brown is thinking along the same lines I am.
I think from the department's perspective, if there's a desire to move forward with the prior planning areas that we proposed, we'd like to get that from the committee, and then we'll proceed with getting bids and bring that bid information back to the committee for consideration late summer.
Okay, so that's what I guess is before the committee, is if the committee wishes to look at that original proposal of the plantings, which is in the document there. And there were two different types there, scaled back in the original 102,000. And if so, then yeah, Rick will work on getting actual bids for us to look at. So I did see Councilmember Edens, your hand up.
Sure. Just on a couple of things. Back in 2019, it might have been for the fiscal year 2020, but there was a generally speaking, a different makeup on council. And some of us thought that the plantings that went in along 100 around town center would be a good thing. And some folks that thought that no beautification basically should be done. So what we were left with was an extremely scaled back version of what we originally had planned. And at that time, all other discussions for continuation kind of went out the window. And I will say the committee at the time did get into the specific plantings rather than just approval or not, because at the time, one of the species that we would have planted had moved off the normal list to the invasive species list, and we caught it in time. And so there were some changes on that. So it's kind of always been my intention, at least, to expand on what we've done before. However, my recollection of the previous discussions was that we, or at least a couple of us, felt that the city has had issues with, we don't have unlimited resources. And as the environment is certainly changing, the plantings that we've already had established in other areas of the city have had increasing stress and are being replaced at rates due to disease, death, and drought as well. And so my concern is maybe perhaps doing more of the same types of things, although it would have a similar line of sight as perhaps other areas of the cities, is kind of more to mulch around. So I know when some of us were talking before, we were thinking maybe the compromise is let's expand on plantings, but maybe do it in a way that would require MoDOT to mow less, because at the time there were some complaints about the frequency of MoDOT mowing. And so the thought was, if that area was expanded on and wasn't traditional landscaping and became something like wildflowers or native grasses, it would fix the mowing problem and it would help the ecology, and we wouldn't have to mulch in between. So I was kind of surprised to see a traditional landscape brought back, and then also separate prairie grasses, which I'm really glad to see, which will give some of the color and flowers the mayor talked about as well. So I'm not sure if I'll get to a point where I'm comfortable with the particular plant selection or the look or the long-term maintenance costs, but in general, I do think we need to have an expansion of these types of projects. And so the general concept I support, but doing more of the same, that's going to maybe require For example, I know Sumac's on there, and we've had a lot of replacement issues with that. And I commend the department for trying to keep up with it. I just want to make sure that we do something that's beautiful, that we're not, constantly trying to chase. Whereas the other method might have a 5-year cost for maintenance that would not continue to expand.
Okay. thank
So I'm
you.
not making,
Yeah.
not making a motion.
No, not yet. All right, well, let's see. Councilmember Bertolino had his hand up too, so let's.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the same recollection as Councilmember Eden is on the budget discussions way back when. And my recollection was that at the time, I think it was the 2020 budget, going into 2020, in which we did not have a balanced budget. And some of us kind of jumped up and down and said, there's no way we should put a budget out there that isn't balanced. And as a result of that, the administration did a great job going back to each department and figuring out what things we could delay or push back and so on. The landscaping was one of those issues. Okay, so the thought of the continuation of landscaping has always been there, and we've always supported that, but the dollars weren't there. So we had everybody back off. And the plannings we did do back then was in line with the balanced budget. So that was great. But we never said we weren't going to go farther west and keep going. That was my recollection of it. Okay. Just to clear my confusion, either Rick or Steve, what you're referring to in the 72,000, is that the number you threw out? Because I didn't get the memo. I didn't see that anyplace else, but there's this, which is not it. There's just this. And I did, anyway, whatever, it's 72,000. Are you saying then that the exhibits B1, B2, and C1 are inclusive in that $72,000 number?
So the 72 or 73 was exhibits C1 and C2. That's the,
that was just
what
the
we
native
called the
planting.
scaled back costs. That's the more formal landscaping. Exhibit B1, B2, that was the 102,000.
I'm even further confused. Okay.
That's not in front of us here, right, Rick? That's the one that was attached to the agenda online.
It should be both. So
I
I
didn't
didn't
hear the letter.
Yeah, we
attachment online.
copied.
Well, I'm looking for your memorandum.
So no, you don't have that hard copy.
We didn't provide a hard copy of the cost. No, that's correct.
Okay. So that's an attachment to the agenda. If I may, all right, repeat, Rick, the 72 or 73,000 covers the exhibit here of C1, the scale back plantings, right? And anything else?
Yeah, C1 and C2.
All right, and then the prairie grass or the native grasses, right? No?
There's the 102,000 or the bushes and stuff, whatever you call that. So that was what we first presented. And that
So the prairie grasses should be included in that packet. Their areas A through G, I believe is what Ken referred to them as. I believe they're exhibits E1, 2, and 3. Those are the native prairie grass planting areas that Ken came up with.
Okay, the E1, E2, E3, I've got those. Okay, that's the prairie grass part. And then C1 is the scaled back median plantings.
Correct. And maybe there isn't a C2. I was thinking there was 2, but I may be incorrect saying that.
All right, so the 73,000 was the median landscape cut back, the scale back, I'm sorry, version, and then the native plantings, right?
no native plant. Well, are you talking bushes and that when you say native?
No, I'm talking about the E1, the potential native planting zones, the E1, E2.
So we have three different scenarios here. We have a $102,000 scenario, which is native plantings, and that would be B1, B2, I guess. Then we have a $72,000
Wait a minute,
one.
B1, B2?
Is that right?
That would be
Alright.
the first 2 pages.
It'd be the first 2 pages. That's
All right.
that's the $102,000 one.
Okay,
Then C1 is the scaled back plan, same native plantings, but scaled back. That's $72,000.
okay,
Okay. Then if I'm correct, Rick, then E1 and E2 and E3 would be the prairie grasses. And I don't know if you can tell, but the part of the handout here, and I actually asked Rick, so there's the pricing of that is not really apparent here other than, so Rick, can you direct them? Because we're looking at a $12,000 price for seeding and a $86,000 price or something for plugging that. Do they have that in front of them?
So it's, yeah, those numbers are not in front of you, and I apologize. It is posted as part of the memo online, but the native prairie grass plantings, the way they quoted it is they gave us 2 options for the installation, either seeding or plugging. And the seeding is much less expensive as compared to the plugging, essentially, but you get apparently a much better result if you spend the extra money and plug the materials that way.
is this one, Rick?
No, you won't find it on there. It's on the
Okay, this
online
is, because
version.
this says Shepherd Road turf to conversion. That's something totally different.
I don't believe we included all the information in the DJM hard copy that's in front of you for all those areas.
So maybe what we could do, just to kind of back to simplifying it, is really at this point, because we don't need to make a decision tonight, it's going to be for the fall. Just a question before the committee is, do we want to re-explore that original plan that came to us, which obviously, as you heard tonight from Councilmember Edens and Councilmember Bertolino, at the time we were going down a different path because of the environment, finances, but now we're in a different situation. So if we do want to, that's when Rick would get bids on it to do that. But there's, I guess, a clear difference in like what you see, like when you come to City Hall along 100, those are plantings right there versus what is it?
Prairie grass.
Prairie grass. So what's going on right now in front of City Hall, along the median here, that's the plantings. So if we
The
want to be
native
consistent,
plantings, yeah.
then we would have to direct them to look at doing that, getting quotes. So just hope to clarify. So Councilmember Bertolino, and then we've got still some more
Okay,
comments.
thank you for that. I would prefer that we bring this back to the committee again with Ken Keitel here and let Ken walk through exactly what kind of plantings we're talking about. And I'm also confused from the mayor's comments. Are the mayor's comments saying he doesn't particularly like this design? He wants more flowering plants? Is that what?
Well, I think the mayor's comments, and just keep me honest there, is that we were going down a different path than what is here on 100 in front of City Hall. I think he wanted to have consistency with our city to take what's on the 100 right here and bring it down there versus just doing prairie grass. So the committee a while back decided to go a different path and say, let's just do prairie grasses. Councilmember Edens alluded to that. And so the mayor's saying, no, why don't we look at doing just what we did in 100 and do it for the rest of our city? Yeah, so Councilmember Farmer.
I was going to say, I think that consistency throughout the corridor is an important thing. So, I mean, the number doesn't scare me. I think, I guess I have the good fortune of driving past all those plants since I turn off on West Glen Farms every day. I think that there's certainly some plants in there that we could probably swap out with other plants that might do slightly better or whatever. But I think getting the department on the road of figuring out the best possible design to do that. And if that means having Mr. Keitel come in and give us a once over on these plants or whatever, that's fine. But I think, I think it's a stark difference when you move across the border into Wildwood and you get to see all the plantings and things compared to some of our other cities neighbors. So I'm okay with moving forward with the bigger plan that was originally conceived. I think it's important to tie those two things together. So I can make that, I'll make the motion if that's what we need to do.
Well, yeah, we don't have a motion, so yeah, if you want to make that, at least to get it on the table for discussion, yeah. All right, so you want to make that motion to review what that plan is, what is out there. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, and Councilmember Jackson seconded that. So we've got the motion on the floor. Still have Councilmember Edens that wishes to speak. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna motion to postpone until the next meeting and here's why. Because I thought Councilmember Burlino had an excellent point. If Mr. Keitel was able to answer questions on perhaps why the plants were chosen that they were. But also because I've got a lot of residents, right, that are concerned about deer, and we have a deer proposal coming and I don't know what the cost is. And the first thing that they're going to say to me is, how dare you plant more plants and then tell me you don't have enough money to remove deer that are in excess. And so the fact that these are probably not plants that deer are going to be interested in nor be attracted to is irrelevant in their mind. And so it would be very helpful for me to have the number that I know that I'm going to need to spend on deer reduction before I make a decision about planting in terms of justification. The other thing is, it would also be helpful to know the number that we think we would need to get caught up for ash tree replacements in our wards, right? So when we have a resident say, how come I have to wait for my tree to be replaced, but you have enough money to plant on a highway, I can have an answer. And I don't have those answers, so I don't feel comfortable moving forward tonight.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'll just mention what I am thinking of. I waited to the end. I'm kind of leaning towards what Councilmember Farmer mentioned, because just the fact of consistency, because I have heard the comment that this area gets the attention and the folks that are out west don't. And I think we'll have opportunity to look at, plantings to make adjustments. I'm not an expert. I rely on the experts to tell us. But I think enough for the direction to say we should be consistent with that. The only reason I wouldn't support a postponement is you could make that argument about anything, really. I mean, there's a lot of things, and we can walk and chew gum in the city and do this and still other stuff. So I think that, deer is still moving forward. And, this was a key priority, beautification, as part of the 2020 vision plan. So, to me, it's still something that we committed as a council, even back then, that we wanted to beautify. But, the argument could be made with so many issues there. So we have a $16 million budget that we allocate to do that all.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
you had a second, we had a motion to postpone,
There is a motion
And-
to postpone, and it needs a second.
and I will second that.
Okay. So now, any other comment on the motion to postpone?
Yeah, and we have to vote on that before we go.
Yeah, if the
Okay.
motion to postpone succeeds, then we
Yeah.
would just postpone.
And the reason I'm postponing, I think it's a good idea. I think we ought to go ahead. We're going to get there. I want to do this. Okay. But I'm just totally in a fog as to what exactly we're saying. And I agree with Lauren. I hate to say, well, let's say to the council, let's spend $102,000 and can't answer any real questions about, okay, what's that exactly going to look like? So I really want Ken to come here and talk. And that's why I would vote for postpone.
Well, I think that we would get that anyway, because at this point, we're not approving the plan. We're approving him to just get the bids with the details on it. He doesn't have that right now, Rick. So if we give him the direction, then he could come back and actually give us the full breakdown with what's in it. And we can ask Ken to be a part of that conversation. If we don't give him the direction, then we're just waiting for Ken to speak, and then we still give him the direction at that time, so we lose a meeting. City Administrator, do you want to share that?
I just kind of wanted to reinforce what you said, but in little slightly different words. So I understand where you're coming from, Councilmember Berlino. I think what we're hoping, Mr. Brown and I, to come away with tonight is direction. And it's really what this committee wants to do in terms of native plantings versus prairie grass for the median, for the two crossovers west of 109. And the question, if we get that answered, then that gives Rick, which road to go down, and then and then we can talk about details about that. But I mean, we're talking two different things, and the pricing, we can't really compare. We've got $102,000 estimate, but again, we would go out to bid versus a 72. And then the others, that was more than just that. So we really can't compare the prairie grasses, but I think what this committee will, what we would look for is, do you want to go down what we originally talked about, which is the native, or do you want to put that to the side and then talk about prairie grasses instead of the native plantings? And then Rick will go down and getting bids. That's really what we're trying to decide here, is one or the other, because they are totally different. And the mayor spoke about what his vision was, but at the end of the day, this committee really needs to decide which way you want to go.
I think procedural question from me. I see that Councilmember Rambo's hand is up.
Is that up from before?
Is he allowed to?
He could speak. I'm not sure is that from before? Did he have his hand up?
No, I think that's.
Because I sent him a message to see if he wanted to speak, but I haven't heard. So the only way we could find out is you'd have to. bring
How
him
would
in, I
that,
guess, right?
procedure? I don't think he's not.
Well, we have a motion on the floor for postponement, so really the conversation needs to be on the postponement. Yeah.
But I mean, you have an individual who had the chance to speak in public participation. Well, he's an ex officio member, so
Yeah,
never mind,
yeah.
never
The
mind.
only thing is, right now, we really do want to keep it on the motion to postpone. So
Yeah.
that's just regarding the postponing. So Councilmember Berkeley.
I'm sorry, I'm getting too many bites at the apple here, but it's a big apple.
It's a big apple.
It's a big apple. I didn't understand, Steve, at the beginning of this discussion, what our mission was. And maybe others heard it, I didn't, but you clarified it, that we're really deciding A or B. We're either going to decide do the plantings or do the natural grass. That was the decision you wanted tonight.
Yes, sir.
And I didn't understand that until right now. Hopefully I'm not alone in that confusion. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just a direction.
All right. Well, given that, I'm going to withdraw my second for the motion to postpone. Okay. And we can have a discussion on the main motion.
Okay, and then I do see Councilmember Hopper with his hand up. So
Thanks. Yeah, I have I guess a procedural question. Can we have a motion to postpone when we already had a motion on that had been made and seconded, and went into discussion, and we immediately had a motion to postpone? So I don't know, can those both be taking place at the same time?
So we have a motion that was made for postpone. There was a first and a second. Now the second has withdrawn their.
Right,
motion.
but before that, we had a motion from Councilmember Farmer and seconded by Councilmember Jaxie, and then it should have gone into discussion on that. And then Councilmember Edens came.
Yeah,
into
if you could
discussion
jump
there
right in.
and made a motion to postpone. I was just a procedural question. I just didn't know if we had to discuss one motion before we do a motion to postpone, but.
The postpone can jump ahead. And so that's one of those motions where if it automatically takes precedence. So now that the motion to postpone doesn't have a second, and unless there is a second here, we're back to the main motion that was made by Councilmember Farmer, which is just on, again, you're looking for just providing the direction to them.
Yeah, I mean, the motion basically is, I would be more in favor of the native plants that match what we've got. So that would be my suggested direction, but just to move that conversation forward, whatever we need to do, I'm cool
So
with that.
just maybe for clarity's sake, it's just motion to provide direction that we get more information regarding that concept of the native plantings.
Yep.
So that's still the motion on the floor. Councilman Roberto.
I'm back to confused again. My wife says this all the time. You're totally confused. Oh, wait, now what I just heard from Steve was that we're to make a decision. They asked us to make a decision. Do we do the median plantings Okay, or do we do the native grasses? Yes, sir. Isn't that right, Steve? That was yes or no?
Prairie grass.
The prairie grass plantings.
Just for the two spots. Just for the two spots. You know what? Disregard the last few pages because those are like along the bridge.
Right.
We're not going to even get to that yet. We're just focused on two intersections.
Correct. On 100
Yeah,
west of
And the
109.
plantings, and it's either we do the plantings or we do the native
Prairie
grasses.
grasses.
That's the up or down question you
Yeah.
want. And is that what you, is
Yeah,
that your,
the basic idea is, do we want to have plantings, whatever we want to call them, that are kind of mirroring what we've got down on this end over there, or this other new idea that they came up with? My suggestion is we stick with what we've got and keep kind of a unity going together between the two things. And then we can approach whatever we want to put prairie grass wise and other places and other wards another day.
Yeah. So just very much, we're just talking about a concept at this point, what direction we want them to look at too. Councilmember Jaxie and then Councilmember Nine.
Okay, so I seconded the motion, but I also have a question then. So on the original plantings, if we were to mimic the plantings that are on this side down west of 109, has there been any effort to look into those plantings? Has there already been effort to look into those plantings to make sure that they don't cause problems? I don't know what those problems would be. I'm not a landscape smart guy. Had the plantings that we've already got caused any problems? Is there any concern with them causing more work, and thus we should have gone with the native grasses, and that's why you brought it to us?
Would you like me to respond to that or?
Yeah, that
So-
question was for you, I believe.
I think the short answer is, we've worked with Ken Keitel for many years now, and it's been a nice relationship from the standpoint is from that standpoint, he's learned as he's gone along. So we have provided you plantings that we've used previously, and then Ken is pretty comfortable with are proven already and should work well. And keep in mind, we are working with difficult areas. These are not irrigated locations. None of our landscaping that we have in the medians are irrigated. So they're difficult locations. They're harsh environments. So the types of plants that work are limited, and it has taken a lot of expertise to get to the point where we are pretty comfortable these are good choices. But I am not trained in this. Michelle is the only one here probably who's really she has obviously more experience than I do, believe it or not, from this perspective. And I'm certain we could bring Ken back to talk in more detail about that.
Yeah, and that's maybe, and I'm going to let other council members that are waiting to speak, but maybe we'll have Ken come and then we'll hopefully break it out where it's really clear exactly what's happening. But I think at least for tonight, if we just determine whether we go left or right, basically native or prairie, then at least that gives them the direction of what to focus on. But council member, I think, I'm trying to forgive me for the order of it. Do you remember who was up first?
I just had a quick question. So if we're saying we're going to go native and when you're going to go out to get the bids, are we still going to get two options back on bids? Like here's the expensive version and here's a little scaled down version. Or are we saying we're going for the bigger outlay that looks here for the 102?
City administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's at the direction of the committee. Again, as Mr. Brown pointed out, there's $100,000 in the 2022 budget for landscaping. So the motion could be, well, ultimately, when we decide, we'll go out and we can get, and so it would be within the budget. Now, if you all were to say as part of the motion, let's say, well, right now we're looking for direction. If the direction is go out and get bids on plantings within budget, that's what we will do. And yes, there will probably be a couple options with a cap of $100,000. So
maybe that's
we
a
would
good
do that.
suggestion to clarify for the maker in the second. Would you be okay with that to say do it within budget and whatever options for the committee to consider, city administrator?
Yes, that would be fine. I wanted to clarify just one point with Councilmember Jaxie. in what he just mentioned before, when he was asking about the vitality of the plants in this area and so forth. The last statement you made was, did we feel that there might be an issue, which is why we came to you with prairie grasses? And I want to clarify that. We did not come forward with the prairie grasses. We presented to the committee back in the fall, the native, okay, which was what this committee was charged with. And we were charged with by the mayor as part of his beautification plan, find out about looking into it. At that time, we were directed by this committee to look into prairie grasses. That was not our idea. We were directed to do that. So we had presented the native grasses, which was consistent with what we had done and what we initially were charged with doing.
Okay, thank you. So Councilmember Edens, you're up again.
Yeah, so this is really just to clarify because it is in the motion using the word native. And this is where it would be helpful if Mr. Keitel was here. Are we talking native to North America, native to the Midwest, or native to Missouri?
I don't know. That's a good question.
So the plants that he has, or I'm asking, are they
Yeah.
native to Missouri or are they just native to North America?
Rick, what would be the answer to that?
Well, the best answer is we could probably provide you a detailed explanation. I did have this discussion with Ken earlier because I expected this would come up. And basically, if I understood it, 3 of the 4, what we would consider to be native. Now, if you want to dive down and say how native, is it native to Wildwood? Is it native to Missouri? I don't know that I could tell you that. But I think 3 of the 4 are varieties that are from native species. Because even when you say native, they get cultivated. Michelle could speak to this, I'm sure. They get cultivated from original native species. Most of this is not necessarily that it's been cultivated from a native species of original descent. Is that fair to say, Michelle?
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I
Resident
don't-
former Missouri Botanical Garden expert in the building. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, Mr. Keitel's defense, it is very hard to find plants that hold up with a lot of road salt thrown on them as well, in addition to the drought. So that's a consideration. But to elaborate on whether we've done anything that has had issues before, perhaps when it was originally planted, you know, maybe a decade ago or 5 years ago, it wasn't an issue. But if you think about all of the burning bushes that are planted along the 100 and 109 corridor that's going and bordering all of the trails, technically all of those are now invasive species. So there's hundreds of them. And so there are additional costs when things, you know, move off of just a non-native list to invasive or vice versa. So it's kind of trying to catch up with a moving target. So you can also make the argument that we could be removing what we already have rather than adding new, but I certainly, again, support continuation of beautification, but I would like to see us still at least try an area with prairie grass somewhere and wildflowers and see how it works. And if that's a model that is sustainable and saves us money on mowing in 10 years and looks good, that would be good.
Yeah, and I think we'll have that follow-up discussion on those additional like prairie grasses after we get through this first one here. And what you had asked before or mentioned about, you know, exact plantings, you know, for those that like you that really know more than maybe I would, or Councilmember Jaxie, then, you know, Ken Keitel probably would be the one to have that conversation since he's the city's, you know, vendor on that. All right, so I don't see any other hands up. So just in the motion now, I think everybody's clear on it. So we'll just, again, this is just providing direction. It will come back to this committee when we see the exact plan. And I think it's a well versed motion here. So voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any oppose? Any abstain? All right, that motion passes. All right. It was unanimous. I didn't hear anyone oppose or abstain. Right? I think being that no one's spoken forth about opposing or abstaining, I'm taking that as unanimous. Okay. All right, next item is the proposed Strecker Road crosswalk improvement.
All right, thank you, Chair Garitano. The 2022 Capital Improvement Program budget does include $235,000 in it for 2022 for construction of the Strecker Road sidewalk project, as you may be aware. That project proposes to construct or extend a 880 foot of sidewalk that would essentially fill a gap that's missing on Strecker Road, provide a continuous path essentially to Ellisville from existing sidewalks. Unfortunately, that project has slowed and progress has been lacking this year for a variety of reasons. But the bottom line is the property owner that's impacted by that project has not been very receptive to working with the city at this point in time. So I wanted to point out, as part of that project, we proposed to address 3 crosswalks. One would be a new crosswalk that would be installed with the portion of that sidewalk to allow folks to go back to the north side of the road from the south. But we also included in the scope, based on request, to address 2 existing crosswalks on Strecker Road that are west of the project. So there are 2 crosswalks that we striped a few years back at resident request. One is at Timber Ridge Estates Drive, and the other is immediately at the west end of the project at Engelbrook Court and Drive. So the thought was to install rapid flashing beacons at all 3 of those crosswalks as part of the Strecker Road sidewalk project. And I think, as you're aware, we've installed those rapid flashing beacons at a number of crosswalks. Most recently, we worked with St. Louis County to install them on Old State Road, immediately south of Ridge Road. And then I think I counted, in addition to those, I think we have 6 other installations throughout the city where we have installed those rapid flashing beacons. The most notable being right out on Taylor Road as you leave headed towards Route 100. We have them across the road there. So we've installed them in numerous locations. They cost about $25,000 to install them, believe it or not. They are still fairly pricey to acquire the equipment and to get them installed. So it's about 25,000 grand per each. So they have proven to be very effective, and I think residents generally are very favorable in their response to them. So recently it has been recommended that because our Strecker Road project to install the sidewalk has been delayed and has not making progress, that maybe we should move forward and split out a project merely to install the flashing beacons at, would have to be just 2 of the 3 crosswalks on Strecker Road, the one at Timber Ridge Estates and the other at Engelbrook Court and Drive. That, if we did such, would cost, I would say, about $50,000. To do that work, we could pay for it out of the total $235,000 that has been budgeted for 2022. And that would allow us to make some progress with addressing pedestrian needs, at least on Strecker Road. So the recommendation in this regard from the department is to take this recommendation to the Board of Public Safety for further review and approval. I would note that we've had other locations that have come to our attention that have also been recommended for flashing beacons. And I think that needs to be considered more on a larger scale, what makes the most sense relative to moving forward and spending money on flashing beacons at crosswalks. There are other needs potentially out there, and we don't obviously have an unlimited budget to do so. So the recommendation that we were making was to send this to the Board of Public Safety for essentially review and approval, and then if so, proceed ahead with a separate project to install rapid flashing beacons. So with that, I will conclude and take any questions from the committee.
All right, I see Councilmember Farmer got, Councilmember Eden, your hand up. When, looks like when first Councilman Farmer, you going to speak as well, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Eden, you're up first.
I was going to say, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to proceed to send it to the Board of Public Safety, but I'm going to say for all 3, the existing and the potentially new crosswalk, And the reason why I want to make sure that the new crosswalk, although I realize it would be a crosswalk on one side or both sides potentially to nowhere, is because my residents are already crossing on the Inglebrook side. They're taking their strollers through the dirt along Strecker Road, and we can't do anything about that right now in terms of putting a sidewalk in. But I can at least alert the drivers coming both directions that there are people crossing the road, because they're doing it anyway. And so we're going to have to provide a safe part for them to cross. And so my question is really about procedure. It is going back through the Board of Public Safety because that's what's typically done. Is that correct? And the reason I ask is because this has been, I think, for anybody in Ward 2 and in Ward 4, it's deja vu. I can't tell you how many times we voted to allocate money on the same plan. So in my mind, if it's part of a bigger project council's already approved, why does taking a smaller portion out of it have to go through another citizen committee again, and this committee, and then to council, if the intent of council and the strategic goal was to move it forward as an entire project? Well, I guess why do I keep running the same race? Is that strictly procedure? Is it's got to go through the same committee again?
Councilmember, I guess, to be clear, I don't know there's a requirement that it does have to go to Board of Public Safety. It was more that that's a function that the board was, in my opinion, formed to consider. And again, there have been other suggestions for other locations, and with limited dollars, it was just felt it would be good to get a second opinion as to say if this is the best use of our money.
Okay. With that explanation, I'm okay with it, although I am truly, it feels like Groundhog Day, doesn't it? Yeah, okay.
Councilmember Farmer.
So I'm not sure if it's possible to do this. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I agree with Ms. Edens that we owe these residents over here something. And the sidewalk project, although it's been approved seemingly every several months, it's now somewhat out of our control as to whether we can get that in or not. So my suggestion was going to be, if it's possible, to get the 2 flashing signs up where we can put them, and task the Public Safety Commission with then coming up with whatever requirements would be necessary to put these in other places. We've got it up on Ridge Road. There's some, I think, coming down in Ward 5. I think there's one over here. So they seem to be very effective. But I do think that, putting in some parameters as to what is necessary is important. However, I think that this little section of Strecker Road has been studied to death. So my suggestion would be whatever we need to do to get these things up as quick as we can. We got them up on Ridge Road in seemingly a month and a half. So we should be able to get this done in the same thing. It's a windy, dangerous road. We got to get something up there.
Well, Councilmember Berlino, in your part of Board of
I
Public Safety,
am,
so
yes.
you
I
could
was
probably
speak to that if I could. Yeah, I think, Rick, is there any possibility we can get this on the Board of Public Safety meeting agenda for Thursday night?
Councilmember, unfortunately, no, because we did cancel the meeting, but I assure you we could have it for June.
Yeah, well, my comment was going to be, if we don't do it this Thursday, we got a month's delay until we can get it approved again. I've been on the Board of Public Safety for many, many years, and we've never turned down a safety request as yet. Money is no object to that committee. Okay, if that's up to the council to decide. So I would say, Rick, if it's okay with you, I would say we don't have to take it to the Board of Public Safety. We can just go right to the council with it.
all right. Councilmember Jackson, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so total new guy, questions and thoughts. Rick, let's start with, you said something about these are very effective. Can you tell me what that's based on? That when you made your comments, you talked about these lights being very effective. Based on what? Is there a study? How do we know that somebody is safer because of these?
Well, I think I could find some studies and provide that to you. Certainly, they have been studied and have found them to be effective. I just think anecdotally, they've been well received. The locations where we've installed them have been well received. And just when you see the result, when you see them flashing in person, they are very effective at catching your eye and improving your awareness of the crosswalk and the fact that there might be a pedestrian there desiring to cross the road. So I'm a strong advocate of their use. They are expensive. And I do think we probably have limited locations where we should be putting them. I don't know they need to be installed at every crosswalk, but where they are installed, I think they work very well.
Yeah, that would be my other concern is if we installed a lot of them, then they start to lose their effectiveness. If I see something often, it starts to stop catching my eye. So when you mentioned that there are other locations, can you give me a swag? How many other locations are we talking about in the city that these are being considered for?
Well, I can tell you the locations that I've been aware of, or that have the locations that I believe would be good candidates. I know the ones that have concerned me are on Route 100, and we have Wildwood Greenway Trail crossing right out here at the I always forget if it's Plaza Drive or Fountain Place. But as you leave Town Center on the south side of Route 100, that's a very, when people leave Route 100, they're at high speed. The sight distance at the crosswalk at the Wildwood Greenway crossing is very limited. I think it'd be an excellent location, as well as on the other side of Route 100 at Fullerton Meadows or Forest Leaf Parkway. So it's the same situation. You have folks crossing Forest Leaf Parkway on the path, and you have folks leaving Route 100 at high speed. I think both those crosswalks, given the speed of traffic on Route 100, would be excellent candidates potentially to install those. I know I've also heard from Councilmember Garitano about Manchester Road. We have some already on Manchester Road, but we have nothing to the west, clear down at 109 and Viola Gill. That's been raised as a potential location as well. And I think just in general, schools should be a location that we prioritize as well. Valley Road at Crestview Middle School, there's a crosswalk at that location over Valley Road, which I think would be another good spot potentially to investigate for their use. So schools would be high on my list, frankly. Not all of them would be good candidates necessarily, but certainly in general, schools would be high on my list.
So what I think I heard was several $100,000 worth of lights. And I absolutely support the idea of safety, but I just like our erosion task force, I feel like we need to do some prioritizing in there. If we can't bite the whole apple, we got to take it a bite at a time. And so was Councilmember Eden's motion seconded?
I don't believe there is a motion yet, but yeah.
I thought you made a motion, did you not?
Well, I thought I did, but there wasn't a second. And then I liked there was a more aggressive motion made later. So I will.
Well, I
withdraw
thought
my
your motion was for 3 and you sounded like you were supporting
Well,
the
but mine was
2.
also for public safety again. We're now
Yeah, and we're, just so you know,
going around.
where we're talking about, like the third, unless I'm misunderstanding, or correct me if I'm wrong, the third location is, yeah, but like, I don't know that we can technically put something there right now, because we would need an easement of some kind. Oh, I think we need an easement, which is why that sidewalk's not going in. So the priority is the 2 that we can put in, and that other one was already kind of, if I remember right, was somewhat baked into the sidewalk proposal anyways, or close to it.
Okay. So you,
But maybe what we could do is, right, if we can't run the crosswalk out to the side and on the edges, maybe there's a way to install some other sort of slow down or speed control sign at that new place where the new crosswalk would go, so that it's still being evaluated at the same time. Does that make sense? You do the other 2 and then we'll.
Yeah, I think we get what we can get.
I think the 2 sounds like there's a connection point already there. What worries me about the third is you're now encouraging people to go into an area where they could get hurt because there is no crosswalk. And so I think that might make sense to hold off on that, because it doesn't make. But the only thing I would, and I actually, Rick, you mentioned you got requests. I got a request just before this meeting out of nowhere that came to me that Main Street and 109. They have high-speed traffic on 109 that turns into Main Street, and they want to have the same light just as there is at 109 in Pond Grover Loop Road and 109 in Bent Ridge. You know, they want the flashing lights. I just got that tonight. This particular situation is part of a project. So it's not like we're, you know, looking for funds, right? The project is budgeted and funded. But I do think it really means we do need to come up with some method of how do you evaluate it, because otherwise it becomes very subjective. Like, you know, it's just like, is there accident data? Is there, you know, an injury? You know, things that, you know, in the future, like, you know, the criteria can help dictate which ones need to get done first versus later, you know.
Right, and so.
City Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, and I don't want to speak for Rick, but I think that is the very reason why he, in his recommendation, he was suggesting that this go to the Board of Public Safety, because this type of analysis is what they do in terms of where is the best place to spend the money, which crosswalks, because we're talking more than 2 or 3, we're talking several throughout the city. So if this is, you know, to be a study of, you know, lighting crosswalks within the amount that's budgeted in 2022 or in the 2023 budget. But I think that's why he was suggesting to attach some data to it as opposed to subjectivity.
The 12 lights we're looking for, or we think are on our horizon, here's how we would prioritize them, et cetera. So I'm still with you. I still think that needs to occur. But if Mr. Farmer's motion is actually made, I'm seconding. Cool. Did I
Okay.
just put words in your mouth? Yeah.
So you got a second there. So yeah, I think that is a good point, because otherwise the workaround is if you want to not get the analysis, you stick it in a project or something. Not to say, I don't know what analysis was, you know, provided as far as this goes here, but I think that's good to know, you know, that we're looking at them all equally. Anything else? No other comments? So we got a motion. Go ahead, Joe.
So the motion is to proceed. That can go, my suggestion would be that goes directly to the council. And then I guess secondarily, the Board of Public Safety can come up with some additional provisions for future projects when it comes to the flashing lights.
You would second agree with that?
Yes,
And
sir.
when you say provisions, just for clarity, you look for like criteria.
Yeah, just recommendations as to what,
Criteria
Yep.
for prioritization.
correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Good. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry about that. All right. So we did a voice vote. All those in favor say aye, and we had the ayes had it. Any opposed or abstain? All right, none. All right, that motion passes. All right, next, we have the proposed city contractor agreement with Precision Concrete Cutting. Rick.
At this rate, I'm just kidding. We'll start losing more. Okay, thank you, Chair Garitano. The next item, I believe so. Next item is the request from Precision Concrete Cutting. Recently, we had a small project with this contractor, Precision Concrete Cutting, to remove trip hazards in 3 subdivisions. Those subdivisions being West Hampton Woods, Garden Valley Farms, and Oak Ridge Trails. We were able to remove sidewalk trip hazards from a number of streets in those subdivisions. Precision Concrete is a company that has a proprietary piece of equipment that they describe it as they cut the concrete down instead of grinding it to remove sidewalk trip hazards, where the joints between 2 slabs become a problem and a hazard for pedestrians. And they cut the concrete down in a rather smooth plane, no steeper than 8:1, so that it's ADA compliant. And what they typically look for are differentials that are between 3/8 of an inch to 2 inches in total. Anything higher than 2 inches, they don't treat. It requires us to go in and actually replace the sidewalk slabs with new concrete. So Precision Concrete came in last month and they did kind of a trial project for us for less than 10 grand under the city administrator's authority. So we wanted to try them out to see how well it worked. And I think it was a very good, successful project. We found that the work they did was quick. They got in and out literally in 1 day. The final product was smooth. It was much smoother than we've seen with other other applications where we've ground the sidewalk down. And the other advantage to using them is that they come out and they survey the areas for you. So instead of staff having to go out, walk the sidewalks rather, locate the potential trip hazards and figure out how much needs to be corrected, they do all that work for us. So with a limited staff, it's very advantageous from that perspective. It relieves our office time, and they go out, they survey the sidewalks for you. They tell you how much is out of compliance within that 3/8 to 2 inch range, and they tell you how much it's going to cost. So the bottom line is we would like to continue and do a little more work with Precision Concrete Cutting yet this summer. They did some of the streets in those 3 sidewalk subdivisions, but they did not do them all. We'd like to finish all of them up. And so they provided us a quote to do just that. And the cost to complete the work and address 678 trip hazards in those 3 subdivisions was just under $42,000. So that is the recommendation, is that we'd like to move forward with a contract for additional work with Precision Concrete Cutting for $41,262 to address the remaining trip hazards in West Hampton Woods, Garden Valley, and Oak Ridge subdivisions. And incidentally, if this is as successful as the first trial, I would certainly consider doing this again, not necessarily this year, but implementing it maybe on an annual basis, because I'd really like to emphasize sidewalk trip hazards to a much greater degree than we have previously, because it's just an area that I think has been a little bit neglected, and we can do a better job on it. And I think it would be money well spent for the city. So with that, I'll conclude and address any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Nye.
I live in one of these subdivisions, and I think I mentioned briefly at council, they did a great job. You hardly knew this company was there. They came in, they were out, they didn't make a lot of noise, they cleaned up, and the result looks fantastic. I emailed Rick while I was on vacation because I'm a little concerned that I'm now noticing sidewalks while I travel, and I was running. I'm like, oh my gosh, look, these sidewalks look just like the ones they put in Wildwood. They look great. So I know it's a new technology and it's awesome, but it would be great to finish it. And that's probably one of the things I hear the most. These neighborhoods are walked a lot with dogs and runners and everything. And I hear from people that, they have literally fallen, or that there's, a concern that they might fall. So I'd like to make the motion that we proceed. My only question is, did we miss the cutoff for the discount because it's past April 30th?
I apologize. I meant to call Precision and confirm that they would honor it. I got to believe they're going to honor it. That's will be my explanation to them is, we are going to require you to honor the discount. Otherwise, we won't move forward.
Okay, so we have a motion. We need a second. All right. I saw Councilmember Berlino first
second.
before I turn around, so we'll give him the second there. Any other question on this? Councilmember Jaxi?
Just one comment. I'm not used to contractors telling us where the problem is that they were going to pay them to fix. So, but the only thought I have there is the problem's there or it isn't, right? I mean, a sidewalk, it's not like they can make it up, right? The sidewalk's either a problem or it's not. Just, I mean, something for you to be aware of, Rick, just be cognizant of the fact that we don't want them to create problems that we're going to give them money for. This isn't an exorbitant one, but one that I would just keep an eye on.
All right, seeing no other comments here. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed or abstain? Looks like the motion voice vote is unanimous. All right, next on the agenda, we're going to the proposed city consultant agreement for the Route 109 traffic study.
All right, thank you, Chair Garitano. For 2022, we do have funds budgeted in our capital improvement fund to begin the design of the Route 109 BA South roundabout. I think you're probably aware of that project. We did get federal funding to design and construct that roundabout. So as part of the design of that project, we have in our budget for 2022 another $75,000 for a traffic study of Route 109. And the idea with that budget item in my mind was to address a number of things. One was to make sure that the 109 BA roundabout as designed would work now and in the future with whatever improvements are planned on 109. Presumably that might be 4-laning 109. And it might be the addition of additional roundabouts, potentially at Shepherd and Clayton Road. So in addition, on your strategic plan, there's been concerns raised about Babla Elementary and the need for a traffic signal there. And of course, folks at Bent Ridge have been concerned about their access for many years. So the thought in my mind was try to address all those concerns with one traffic study so we could get the firm HR Green to get ahead of myself a little bit, but have one traffic study to evaluate 109 from BA South down through Clayton Road to come up with recommended improvements in that corridor that we could at least plan on moving forward. That's not to say we could have projects immediately implemented. The main focus there would be 109 and BA. So to address both the design of the 109 BA roundabout and to do the traffic study, we did proceed with a process to hire a consultant engineer. And to do that, I think I've referenced this previously, we have to follow a qualifications-based selection process. We can't simply solicit for bids to do that engineering work. So because we have federal funds with the 109 BA project, MoDOT follows that process for us and tells us we have to follow their rules and guidelines. So we did start that earlier this year. We asked for letters of interest to be submitted from interested firms to do both the traffic study and the design of the roundabout. We received, I think, 9 total letters of interest from those firms, and we reviewed the letters of interest that were submitted and shortlisted 2 firms, HR Green and Horner and Schifrin. We then interviewed both of those 2 firms and have decided that the best firm to do both the design and the traffic study is HR Green. And they did do the previous 2 projects on Route 109. So we worked with HR Green previously. They did the traffic engineering study for the roundabout improvements and the widening that have been implemented previously as well. So the bottom line is the recommendation tonight for the committee is to move forward with a city consultant agreement with HR Green to complete the traffic study for future improvements to Route 109 from Route BA South down to Clayton Road for the cost of just under $65,000. We will like to, assuming this is approved by the committee and city council, I would expect to then follow up next month with a subsequent proposal for the actual design of the roundabout. This is just the first step, which is the traffic study. I wanted to get this underway this summer as soon as possible, and then follow the actual traffic engineering study with the design project as a separate approval, because that is funded out of the federal funds under a separate budget item. So they are separate projects effectively. So the first approval would be for the traffic engineering study. Subsequent to that, next month, I would bring to you the fee and proposal for the design effort, which would follow. So with that, I'll conclude. And I will say we do have $75,000 budgeted, if I didn't say it already, for the traffic study. So I'll conclude and be available for any questions from you all.
All right, Councilmember Nye.
Rick, how does this study that they're going to do differ from, I mean, what are they doing now? Like there's all those, I'm assuming that's for a traffic study that's attached. There's one at Bent Ridge, there's one at Suzanne Ridge. There's like a few up and down 109. Is that not what those are doing? Like, I don't know, car counting or whatever those polls do?
So that's a good question. So we've actually started the data collection effort. Right now, there's a camera out at Oak Ridge Trails subdivision, and we had one at Garden Valley last week, counting the traffic at those intersections. And then also last week, we had traffic cameras out on Route 109. So we went ahead and proceeded with the traffic data collection because we wanted to get that done before school starts dismissing for the year, which the community college is going to be dismissing shortly, and then following that with the high schools and such, Rockwood School District. So that effort has started already. The traffic study that would then be completed would take all that data, and they would primarily utilize a software application called Vissim, which is a modeling software. And what we do is we model first the existing roadway using the software and the traffic volumes that we've collected from the data. And then once we're happy that the modeling effort reflects the existing roadway and the existing conditions first, we usually look at the AM, PM, and usually one other time period, like the school dismissal period, say. Once we're happy that the existing model works, then we model future improvements to address problems that are in the corridor. So effectively, I would expect that we'll look at improvements. We probably will compare, in my mind, improvements that signalize the intersections, and then maybe an improvement that puts in roundabouts to see and compare and contrast those two potential improvements, and then come out of it with a recommendation, whether it's a roundabout or a traffic signal or both, something that we're pretty sure works and addresses the fluctuations of traffic in the corridor, namely the school arrival and dismissal periods and the peak hour traffic periods on the road in the morning and the evening. So it's and long and short, it's a modeling effort that generates data that tells us how well the road is operating and how well we've solved some of those problems that are out there.
You want to make a motion on that, or?
I would like to make a motion that we go ahead and move on with this.
Okay, Councilmember Edens, you get your hand up. Is that a second? Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, then we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor of the department's recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone oppose or abstain? All right, the motion passes. Then obviously we mentioned earlier the topics for inclusion on future agendas. We don't talk about these. These are just listed out here. And again, our targeted dates, and that's why it says proposed, because it could shift around if something comes up that's urgent. Miscellaneous, anything under miscellaneous? Councilmember Jaxie?
So just a question. I mentioned earlier, I've got an issue in Ward 6. We have a stretch of Allenton Road just south of the park there. I don't know how better to describe it, Rick. Bottom line, we've had several accidents in the area. I would say about 6 months ago, one of the residents' daughters, a car full of teenagers, 3 girls ran off the road, one pretty significantly injured. The road, it's just, there was no shoulder. Brought it to Rick. Thankfully, there was, I guess, some money in the budget or whatever that they could actually add a little bit of gravel to the side of the road, which is a dramatic improvement in that area. It offers a little bit of shoulder before, if your tires went off the road, you were coming off the road, which meant you were going down the hill. So anyways, all that to say, I would like the department to look into the possibility of either a guardrail on those there are two curves there, which Rick and I've talked about, either the costs associated with that or just more signage to indicate to drivers that they need to be paying attention about what's coming. I don't know the process for that. I'm too new. So what's the recommendation for proceeding?
I think that, and Rick probably can answer it, and it might be a couple of different options. It could be Board of Public Safety. It could be just Rick looking into it, and if it's within his control, he may be able to do some things. Or if it's significant enough, it probably would come back to this committee, or again, some go to the Board of Public Safety as well. Traditionally, road stuff does go to them, so Councilmember Berlin.
If I could suggest, maybe Rick, we can get Captain Mundell to do crash study and get that data first. And also any other data on Allerton Road.
So you want to chime in? I know we've done a little bit. He has done a little bit already.
Okay.
And I really appreciate everything you and the department have done. The residents are pleased with the addition of the gravel. I'm still getting questions about guardrail possibilities. And so I just want to explore it. I'm not saying we got to do it yet, but I'd like it at least explored.
Yeah, and they probably have other tools too, like, some are preferred over others, like there's the rumble strips that kind of alert people that they're going off the road. But then some people complain about the noise they create. So Rick, what would you recommend?
Well, I will tell you, we have done a little bit of work on this and we did pull the crash records and I don't have those at my fingertips, but we have looked at them and there are some crashes there. This is an area that if you drive it, it certainly does rise to the need to put guardrail in. I think we're not saying that it's not warranted or necessary. I think we support the need. We did this, as Councilmember mentioned, we were able to go out, this was over the winter, and we essentially backfilled the edge of pavement, provided a foot or two of extra width along the edge of the pavement to avoid that drop-off condition. And that's usually what we try to do initially, because if we are going to put guardrail in, we really need to do that first as a first step. So that has been done. I guess the next step would be to look at the guardrail, and the initial indications when we looked at it was, unfortunately, it's fairly pricey. I think we figured upwards of $70,000, $80,000 potentially to install the guardrail, because the run of guardrail it's approaching 1,000 feet thereabouts, if I recall. So it's a fairly expensive endeavor. What I had suggested to Councilmember Jaxie is that it might be something that should be added to the strategic plan potentially. As an action by the city council. And then the way we've handled this in the past is just try to add it to the budget and be sure that we have budget in the following year that we could address it. And we can certainly even split it out and call it out in the budget as a item of work. And that makes it easy to implement it.
All right, anything else under miscellaneous? All right, Rick, I mentioned to you and I got the message today about the resident that's in Main Street Crossing pertaining to the crosswalk. But she also brought up that there's some issues with people heading on 109 southbound as they approach that roundabout at Main Street, that they do not realize that you have to be in the right lane of the 2-lane roundabout in order to go south. And so that causes some people to kind of do some sudden shifting around quickly. And she has had some close calls, including this morning, which is why she contacted me. So I don't know, because it is a MoDOT, I think, but is there an opportunity for better signage or something that could help with that?
Well, as we've discussed, it is a MoDOT road, but Mr. Ryan Piercy is supposed to be at our city council meeting next Monday night. So that would be one opportunity, just to raise it with Mr. Piercy if we wanted to do that. But we'd have to bring it up with MoDOT, whether it's done Monday night or subsequent to that. But we could certainly request that they take a look at it and see if there's something that can be done.
All right. And then the only other thing, did you have one more thing, Councilmember Edens?
I was just going to say, I witnessed a near accident on the way here, actually, at one of our roundabouts. It wasn't the one I thought it was going to be, but I think it's the one you're talking about as you go south before you turn onto 100. And what it is because you've got the bridge going over 100. So on the Lafayette side, you've got one roundabout. The other side, over here, it's like the slope changed or something, because to kind of turn the corner when it goes and then splits into 2 lanes, and then you can merge going eastbound onto 100. For me, in an SUV going slowly, I really almost have to take up that space to show the car waiting to merge in, going onto the
100.
100 that I am going to get off at that exit, because they will start to come in. And so there's something about that particular roundabout going around that curve that feels different. And you know what it is too. Yeah, because you can't, it's hard to get into the lane to take up space. And so I just try to take up as much space as I can and drive defensively, but it feels different driving it.
Well, I don't know if you're driving it correctly or not, but what you see
is where you're staying. Ha 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 ha. I remember that. Yeah. So what I'm talking about is, like when it splits, so you can either go straight or continue to turn, and then it becomes 2 lanes.
It does widen to 2 lanes. So
Correct.
if you're going southbound to eastbound, if you're making a left, you're supposed to stay to the outside lane, not the inside, the
right,
outside.
which I do, but
Right.
It feels different on the slope of the vehicle, if that makes it feels different than the other turnarounds.
What I see is people don't do that necessarily. So if you're on the 109 approach northbound, you're a little confused as to what they're doing. Are they making a U-turn? Or are they making a left turn? And you could think they're making a U-turn, and you might try to dart out in there, and you shouldn't. I don't know. There's something to be done there, frankly. It may be just the nature of that roundabout going from, with the 2 lanes on that part of the circle. But that's the one thing I do see, some confusion about how you're supposed to drive it.
Yeah, you have to get over and go on the outside one, because otherwise I think you're continuing to go around. I'm just saying it feels different driving it with the tilt and
That's to
Right.
keep you from driving too fast.
All right.
pull me out from under the bus, man. Somebody lift me out.
Oh, well, before, if we could, just indulge me for a second, if we could just take a few seconds. Councilmember Clark's mom passed away, and I thought it would be good, since she's a member now of our committee, if we could just take a brief moment of silence for Teresa and her family. Okay, thank you for that. And motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Made by Councilmember Jaxi. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And what means adjourn, Joe Farmer from the basketball court. He turned this camera off right away.